I wrote down all of my memories shortly after Elvis passed away. It was just my way of holding on. I wanted to hold on and not forget.
What happens when the most powerful man in music makes a promise he never gets to keep? One moment, Elvis Presley was mapping out a future filled with love, legacy, and new beginnings. The next, he was gone, leaving behind unanswered questions, an unfulfilled wedding, and a trail of promises that vanished with him. There's a tiny gap in the story, something only Ginger Alden could fill. And that's exactly where we begin. She'd been his fiancée, the last person standing at his side, yet she stepped back from a life behind Graceland's gates. He asked me to move in, she says, but I never did. And that quiet refusal sparked a revelation he respected. That small detail cracks open an entire world. It's not just lyricist lore or embellished myth. This is her bare emotional account, the final untold chapter. And yes, she told him, don't fall asleep. As he headed to the bathroom, he assured her, I won't. But that moment, too, followed a trajectory that felt rehearsed, controlled, almost scripted. The king's friendliest persona masked a man buried in secrets, and Ginger is laying it all out. It starts with an almost magical first impression. Ginger said she heard trumpets when Elvis walked into the room. I know this sounds crazy, she admitted later, but that's what I felt. On November 19th, 1976, a casual introduction orchestrated by her sister Terry, then Miss Tennessee, became the spark that flipped everything. Elvis had seen Ginger as a child, and now, nearly 15 years later, he saw something new, someone who could slip into the hidden parts of his kingdom. What followed? A whirlwind invitation. Late-night phone calls, impromptu tours of Graceland, musical moments, and spiritual readings. It felt cinematic, intense, and inescapable. You want to know how fast it spun out? He was calling her every few hours, giving her a crash course in the world he controlled, and it came with the glitter of personal obsession. Then the cracks appeared. Joe Esposito, Elvis's closest aide, later painted a different picture. I don't think he was going to marry her, he said. Elvis might have popped the question, Esposito claimed, but then he'd veer toward someone else. His promises, Ginger realized, weren't anchored. They were fleeting. She received gifts, invitations, candid confessions, but underneath the romance, something darker glinted. Elvis's world was built to trap the real. That evening tour, singing by lamplight, flipping pages of religious texts, felt enchanting until Ginger saw behind the illusions. She began piecing together a puzzle. The luxury was real, but so was the isolation. He controlled their pace, her shows, even her movements around Graceland. It was overwhelming, she confessed. He seemed to want her to know everything at once, like he feared losing her before she even arrived. But old patterns surfaced. Elvis had a history of sweeping women off their feet only to retreat when they got too close. This time, he even gave Ginger a ring. The moment should have been magical. A beauty queen engaged to an icon. But beneath Graceland's grandeur, something unraveled. Years later, Ginger would speak frankly about the darkness behind the velvet curtains. Inside Graceland's walls, the king wasn't always the dazzling performer. Late in the last year of his life, he was retreating into himself. Ginger saw it clear. The public energy, the roar of adoration, vanished behind closed doors. Instead, he became guarded and frightened. He'd spend days in his bedroom, alone with books and a sense of mounting dread. We stayed upstairs a lot, she said. Upstairs was his fortress. He'd ask, over and over, who's downstairs? If her answer wasn't right, he wouldn't leave his room. Staff, girlfriends, friends of friends, They were all unapproved variables in his equation. Pajamas or two-day stubble, he refused to show himself unless he approved every detail. What looked eccentric was actually a rigid structure of fear and control. His paranoia seeped out in small ways. Even people close to him sensed it. Ginger's sister Rosemary remembers him avoiding downstairs altogether. He said he felt sickened by people pestering him, she told a local news outlet. Graceland, in his mind, stood less as home and more as bunker. Outside threats, or even just unfamiliar faces, triggered distrust. But this wasn't just spatial withdrawal. And what about her? That refusal to move in, that tiny act of defiance. It was her own claim to freedom. She said no, citing family values, and Elvis responded, "I respect that." But that single request revealed his deeper need, to enclose her in his world completely. And the way he reacted afterward, multiplying his control, suggested he couldn't bear any autonomy inside his fortress. This surge of paranoia didn't just shape Graceland's atmosphere, it shaped their relationship. Visits happened when he chose. Gifted exclusivity wore the shape of imprisonment. Proximity didn't equal freedom. He controlled when she could enter his world, and when she had to stay away. Ginger fell for the persona, but the walls closed faster than she expected. And those walls didn't just isolate her, they isolated him too. In that moment, she became less fiancée and more witness. She was watching an icon unravel, locked inside the myth he'd created. Then came the proposal. On January 26, 1977, in a bathroom at Graceland, Elvis led her in, romantic tension mixed with an odd performance energy. He delivered a smooth line, popped open a green velvet box, and slipped an 11.5-carat diamond onto her finger. "I never thought I'd find it in my own backyard," he asked. "Will you marry me?" She said yes. He kissed her, admired the ring, murmured, "Oh boy," again. But there was a hollow echo in the gesture, a sense that nothing had truly shifted. The ring sparkled, but the fortress walls remained, and the distance between them hadn't ended. It wasn't the beginning of their future. It was a mirror, reflecting how little had changed. Now, Ginger is stepping into the open, offering a first-hand account of a story that's been untouched for nearly 50 years. She's not talking tabloid. She's giving us a close-up view. Charm and obsession, generosity and fear, love and control. What started under the illusion of romance is now exposed for what it was. An intense emotional labyrinth behind gold. Amid the shadows, they still had bursts of light. Elvis inviting Terry to the stage to play classical piano, laughter echoing inside his private jet en route to Las Vegas. But these glimpses, once hopeful, were now lifebuoys in a storm. Fame weighed heavily, and Elvis splintered into two people, the adored icon and the man Ginger loved, whose foundation was crumbling behind closed doors. And then came the final stretch. Those last weeks were marked by rehearsals, future tour talks, a visit to Ginger's family just 10 days before the end. Optimism flickered, but the same patterns held. Isolation, suspicion, hidden depths of anxiety. He told Ginger that people would be jealous of their relationship. "Could you handle that?" he asked. She answered yes, naively, not knowing the emotional storm that loomed. On August 16, 1977, Graceland woke up normal. But by day's end, Ginger found him collapsed on the bathroom floor. She was his last living voice, the last person to see him breathing. Decades of silence followed as the world sought answers and tabloids churned rumors. One lurid story claimed that Ginger or her mother had contacted the National Enquirer before Elvis's body had been moved, a claim she dismissed as absolutely false. She remembered shock and heartbreak, watching those around her scramble to manage the narrative. Eventually, Ginger chose to speak, not for profit, but to defend Elvis's memory. It was hard. She watched on TV as his road manager spoke of finding the body before anyone else knew. That betrayal spurred her to act. "I'm truly sorry," she said years later. "Sorry for staying silent when the lies got louder. Sorry for not speaking sooner. But I was grieving the man I loved, and the world wanted a headline, not the truth." That apology carried the raw weight of love, pain, and burden of hanging on to truth under relentless pressure. Ginger wasn't an opportunist. She had loved a legend and lost him to layers of secrecy and spectacle. Now, she's revealing what fans never saw: the loneliness behind applause, the internal distance skimmed over by bright lights. Her emergence isn't vindication. It's a necessary unveiling of a deeply human story. The legal aftermath began almost immediately. Condolence notes turned into legal letters, and hopes of future remarriage or ongoing partnership dissolved into battles over Elvis's estate. Ginger found herself grappling with broken promises and shifting alliances. A world that once seemed her own, now a battlefield. The world Elvis built spun on his presence, but once he was gone, it came crashing down on Ginger. The first sign wasn't a sensational headline. It was a mortgage notice. Elvis had promised that Ginger's mother wouldn't owe another cent on her home. He'd asked her to bring the payment book to Graceland so his father Vernon could finalize the paperwork. He even toured the property 10 days before he died, smiling. Now, all we need is the pool. Then he was gone. What followed wasn't generosity, it was silence. A letter arrived saying the mortgage was 3 months past due, and the pool hadn't been paid for. The Presley estate said there was no signed contract. Elvis's goodwill evaporated, and Ginger's mother filed suit. The case wasn't about greed, it was about a broken promise from a man whose word meant everything. Tennessee's lower court sided with the estate, citing lack of a written agreement. But the Court of Appeals overturned that, unanimously ruling that her family had relied on Elvis's promise to their detriment. The estate took it to the Supreme Court, and lost again, despite technicalities. Through it all, Ginger remained quiet, watching the empire she'd married into crumble under legal pressure. It had nothing to do with the pool, her sister Rosemary said. It was about Elvis's final intentions. Behind those courtroom fights lay a textured truth. As he planned a future, Elvis was quietly clearing house. Staff were being dismissed, tensions rising backstage, whispers of betrayal thickening the air. Ginger watched the eyes of people he once trusted grow distant, wary. He couldn't protect her from the aftermath of his death, and his inner circle dismantled every promise he'd made with a smile. One night in Madison, Wisconsin, Ginger saw a different side of him. He leapt out of his limo to calm a tense standoff between kids and an attendant, shaking hands, restoring peace in that quiet moment. It was a powerful reminder. The king could still act as hero. Yet those instances, once bright and frequent, became rare jewels in his final months. Elvis still sought escape. In March 1977, they flew to Hawaii. Moments of laughter, football on the beach, jokes in the cabin, and Ginger described it as a chance to glimpse the man he once was. But even that brief vacation ended abruptly. An irritated eye ended the trip early. It seemed even paradise couldn't offer sanctuary. She listened as he spoke of a we, their wedding on Christmas Day, a European tour, a family of his own. But everything hovered just out of reach, always replaced by distance and doubt. And then, silence. That silence extended into the lawsuit wrangling that followed. Promises bounced off stone walls of bureaucracy. Ginger leaned into the truth of what she saw. The kindness, the vulnerability, the vulnerabilities, but also the walls he built around himself. She didn't want to shatter his legend. She only wanted it completed, made human. Now, decades later, her story pulses with the lessons of celebrity and legacy. Elvis lived surrounded by luxury, driving pink Cadillacs, gifting Ginger's mother a marquee 1977 Cadillac Seville, now valued at over $80,000, cruising in a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud and a De Tomaso Pantera. His 1962 Lockheed Jetstar became a private jet that fetched over $260,000 for restoration and now tours as a retro RV. He owned Mercedes 600 limousines, Stutz Blackhawks, and a celebrated tour bus, all reflecting a man for whom image and mobility were intertwined. Elvis's real estate legacy, Graceland itself, has become its own saga. Just this May, his granddaughter Riley Keough rushed to court to block a foreclosure auction after fraudulent loan claims threatened to take the estate away. That fight reminds us the line between legend and liability is slim. Ginger's final intimate insight, though, comes in the form of finance and lifestyle reflections. Elvis invested heavily in his image: cars, planes, homes, clothing, property, though many of these purchases were asset-rich and liquidity-poor. Watches, though less documented, likely included luxury brands of the era, fitting a man whose style matched his stage. While insurance policies aren't fully public, it's evident he structured his estate, though perhaps not his promises, for longevity. Key lesson: celebrity wealth can sparkle in view, but without clear legal structure and documented commitments, its promises can evaporate as quickly as applause fades. He was a teenage gospel singer who became the king of rock, then a global icon banking on spectacle and emotion. At the end, Elvis was both idol and idolizer of luxury, and his final chapter shows that even a life of glitter needs foundations. Ginger's story provides that foundation: rich, complicated, courageous. She doesn't tarnish Elvis's legacy. She completes it. As the camera fades from Graceland's gates to the quiet bathroom where a ring once sparkled, one question remains lingering. Can truth shine as brightly as legend? That closing echo is yours to ponder. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. Was Elvis still in control? Or did the world he created ultimately consume him? Be sure to like and subscribe for more powerful human stories from behind the spotlight.